The Empire are heading back to Canada for the first time since 2019 to take on the Montreal Royale and the Ottawa Outlaws, but not at the same time, of course. Week 5 in the AUDL season could be a challenging one for the Empire. They haven't played one of these back-to-back games in 2 nights on a weekend, kind of road trips, in over 3 years as well, and they're going to be without some of their quote-unquote depth pieces. The standings are what they are right now, but any silly expert, including me, knows that the Montreal Royale have put themselves in the early driver's seat for 3rd place in the division, and the Ottawa Outlaws are no longer looking like the little brothers in the north. So for this over-under, we've got 1 Empire pick, 1 Montreal pick, and 1 Ottawa pick, so that's 1 from each over the weekend. And we start with the Empire, of course. When I talked to several new Empire players in the preseason about which players surprised them the most in practice, many of them mentioned the Dross brothers. They are as Empire as it gets, being number 1 and number 2 on the all-time blocks list, but still not being very well known outside of the little New York bubble. And when other players from around the league come and visit, they have to get to know and get acquainted with the Twins. And this is the reputation of Empire players that precedes the current imported star era. The question though for this over-under then was Mike or Ryan. Just like his time on the Empire, 2013 to Ryan's 2014, I've got to start with Mike, and I'm going over 2.5 blocks for the weekend. This is a bit ambitious since he's only played 2 games this season and looks to be getting less points than in other seasons. But he's still number 1 on the all-time list for a reason. While his current brand of defense isn't conducive to Ds, it's much more about containing the action for the big bodies downfield to get the blocks, I know. But he could use this weekend to turn back the clock. And he's had some big days against these two on the road in the past before. 3 goals, 2 assists, and 2 blocks in July of 2015 at Montreal, and 3 assists, 2 blocks in July of 2016 at Ottawa, plus a 3-goal showing at Ottawa in July of 2017. But as I've said before through the years, you forget about the Dross, and you won't forget about them again. Now for the Canadians, let's start with Jaka Reset. I know in 2022 throwing with both hands doesn't impress many other Ultimate players. But for those who can barely throw with one hand, being as adept with both hands as the 21-year-old Reset is still pretty impressive. And that's full stop. I'm not taking any yeah buts or apoplectic eye rolls. Reset is where the game is continuing to go. He's quick, he's long, he can huck, he can leap, and he can throw. For the first 2 weeks of the season, he was the only player to have 2 450-plus yard throwing games. He's just about accounted for 25% of Montreal's throwing yards this season. Led the league with 1,504 throwing yards through 3 weeks, but unfortunately for him, I've got to go under 350 throwing yards against New York. While Toronto, Boston, and Philly didn't have the answer for him, DC held him to just 188 throwing yards in their meeting, forcing him to be a primary receiver. To his credit, he had a career-high 231 receiving yards. But that's what DC will live with, and they got the victory. And I do expect New York to do the same. Much like they did against Ben Sadok, take your best handler, or the guy who's best at throwing the disc, and push him upfield, and live with the results. Now for Ottawa, who like the other 2 Canadian teams, have a ton of new faces for the New York Empire to scout. Yet, one of the faces that they don't have to scout is Jeff Bevin, who's been with the team since 2016. And for those familiar with the Ottawa Outlaws, you might be saying to yourself, wait, Dan, are you going to go with 2 throwing props in 1 video? Close. Instead, we're going with total yardage. Bevin led the team in assists last year with 27 while contributing 14 goals, and led Ottawa in throwing yards with 2,156 in 8 games. So that's why he's the pick here, even if it's a coin flip as to which of Bevin or Nick Boucher will go off. He had 10 scores and 1,128 total yards against Toronto, which is a lot. So I do think it's actually pretty safe to go over 500 total yards against New York. 2 games in 1 over-under, but hey, we got there. So let's review. It's Mike Dross over 2.5 blocks on the weekend. It's Jaka Reset under 350 throwing yards against New York. And it's Jeff Bevin over 500 total yards. If you've got an opinion, and most AUDL fans do, hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and let us know your picks. And as always, enjoy the games.